In announcements in regards to cafeteria behavior, congratulations to the following classes for earning excellent behavior in the cafeteria yesterday. Thank you to Mrs. James, Mrs. Lozano, Mrs. Perez, Mrs. Sanchez, Mrs. Neville, Mrs. Martin and Mrs. Perry, Mrs. Quintanar, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Borges, Mrs. King, Mrs. Powers and Mrs. Ely, Mrs. Felt and Mrs. Limon, Mrs. Bannister, Mr. Burbina, Mrs. Houchins, Mr. Ratto, Mrs. Chavez, Mrs. Dobbs, Mrs. Mack, and Mrs. Wilkes and Miss Sandoval. Nice long list. Unfortunately, we do have a couple of classes that need to work on their behavior, but nevertheless, thank you for all of those who are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Good job, guys.
Also, for lunch today, we are having cherry blossom chicken, and for breakfast tomorrow, we will be having yogurt with granola.
Delicious. And birthdays today, a very happy birthday to Kylie Garton in Miss Limon's class. Her birthday was yesterday.
And in regards to attendance, we have a nice long list again for attendance. Don't forget, school starts at 8:10. We do have a warning bell that rings at 8:08, so make sure you are here and you're here on time. So thank you to Mrs. Bannister, Mr. Burbina, Mrs. Borges, Mrs. Chavez, Mrs. Dobbs, Mrs. Felt, Mrs. James, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Morrows, Miss Martin and Mrs. Perry, Mrs. Sanchez, Mrs. Wilkes, and Miss Sandoval.
All right, have a great day and go Giants!